is a special service feature of KENI Television and KENI Radio, presented by the Disaster Relief Committee. Now, here is your moderator.
Washington, to help us economically get back on our feet so that we can carry on with the development of Alaska. And tonight, we're going to give you a special program. This time is being donated by the Midnight Sun Broadcasting Television Network, and there are a number of other radio stations cooperating in this half-hour program with us, for which we want to thank them. And tonight, we're going to devote this time to giving you, the viewer and the listener, a report on a rather unusual and most important bill. I won't say it's so unusual as it is most important, which is pending now in Congress. A bill that it is felt can go very far toward helping us get back on our economic feet. And this committee, I say, is a little bit extraordinary because it's represented this evening by, well, for instance, on my immediate left is Mr. Frank Harris, who is Republican State Chairman, and on my right, Mr. Russ Meekins, who represents Mr. Mosley, the Democrat Chairman of the South Central District. And a little farther on the right, Mr. Jack Simpson, Republican Chairman of the South Central District. Immediately after the terrible earthquake on Good Friday, both political parties in Alaska realized that it was essential to pull together teamwork. A joint effort would be required to get us back in shape again. And this has been going on now for some weeks. And we're going to tell you a little bit about the effort that has been made. And first of all, though, let me explain the name of our joint committee of both parties. It's called the Joint Catastrophe Committee of the Republican and Democratic Parties of Alaska. And its co-chairmen are Mr. Stanley McCutcheon and Mr. Wally Hickel. They could not be with us this evening. They're attending one of the many vital meetings that's been going on almost around the clock in the last few weeks. And I think in particular, they're preparing for the visit of Senator Anderson this weekend, whose committee will be up here investigating next week. Now I wonder if we can get into a little talk about the purpose of this Joint Catastrophe Committee. Frank, would you be good enough to do that?
Well, the purpose, as you explained earlier, Lowell, is to coordinate all of the activities of both political parties in Alaska. As you mentioned, Wally Hickel and Stanley McCutcheon are the two co-chairmen of the Joint Catastrophe Committee. Our secretary is Emily Savage of the Republican headquarters, and our treasurer is Colleen Rugusco of the Democrat headquarters. The purpose is to coordinate all activities on a political level, activities that we're pursuing through contacts we have through different state chairmen, national committee men, senators and congressmen that many of us know or who are familiar with them, to get them to put the pressure, more or less, or enlighten our congressmen and senators as to the needs in Alaska. I believe the government sector, as everyone has been reading in the paper, will undoubtedly receive considerable relief on the rehabilitation of the highways, the railroad, the docks, the cities, the boroughs, perhaps school districts. But the private sector, the business people, the homeowners, they're the ones that are going to need additional relief that isn't available as completely as laid out in government programs. The reason, as I say, is to coordinate all activities in pushing for this Senate Bill 2719 that Senator Jackson of Washington, along with all 10 of the western states, our senators sponsored, both Republican and Democrat. I think Russ could probably give you a brief synopsis of what is contained in Senate Bill 2719.
Well, the Jackson Plan, as Senate Bill 2719 is called, is similar to the Pearl Harbor Act that we had after Pearl Harbor. They had what they call retroactive insurance. Now, this bill is an amendment to our statehood bill that was passed in 1958, and it will amend the bill to state that this insurance was in effect at that time, and all losses that can be established and so forth will be paid if this bill becomes law by rules and regulations set forth here in this bill by the President of the United States, subject to his approval, of course. Now, it's a long bill, can't read the whole thing, but the main paragraph is paragraph C of section 30, which reads as follows: subject to the authorizations and limitations prescribed in subsections A and B, any loss or damage to property in Alaska insurable hereunder sustained subsequent to January 3, 1959, or from the date of ownership if after January 3, 1959, and prior to the date determined under subsection B, may be compensated, and such loss or damage may be adjusted as if a policy covering the property was in fact in force at the time of such loss or damage. And this is retroactive insurance. In other words, it's a government thing, and the loss has been so great that we don't believe any private company could ever handle this, and they never would. But there has been a precedent set, because they did do this after Pearl Harbor, and several people have now declared that our losses here are greater to some individuals and to some people who have lost both their home and the land that the home was on, and just had every dime and their whole life in it, and they're all just common people like us. Now, many of the people think that well, there were only the great big homes were lost out in the area out there, but there were some other homes that weren't so large, and the biggest percentage of them were little people. And this is what we're trying to help, and this is the aim of this committee.
Well, I can just say, Russ, if I can interject here, that whether the home was a big one or a small one, it hurts plenty, believe me, when it goes down, and an awful lot of them did. And I think, too, that one of the philosophies behind this bill on the part of Senator Jackson is that Alaska is a new state. It has some problems that the other states no longer have, one of them being that we don't have a great deal of capital up here. And also that the people who've come here and who've decided to help build up this place, make it their homes and create their businesses here, deserve a chance to get back on their feet and go ahead again, instead of folding up and having a new wave of people come up here. And I think this is part of it. I hope I'm right anyway. I know that there's been a tremendous amount of activity on the part of our two chairmen, Stan McCutcheon and Wally Hickel. They've been on the telephone day and night practically back east, talking to people in Congress. I know they've been talking to Senator Bartlett, to many others about this, and the word that I have picked up at the various meetings is most encouraging, that it looks like there is a real good chance this bill can go through in this session of Congress. Hope we're not being too hopeful about it, but I think if we really make a big effort that this can happen, and that's the reason for this committee's being in existence. Frank, I wonder if you would, perhaps you and Jack and Russ, all of you could tell a little bit more about just what the committee has done and what plans.
I can give you, the viewing audience, an idea. When we first formed this committee, as probably everyone knows now, it is a political committee, and also the President's Disaster Committee is a political committee. They're political appointees, and also the senators and representatives who would approve this Senate bill are also politicians. And feeling that the politicians like ourselves could probably deal better with them through the knowledge we have of them personally, or what influence we might have. I'm giving you an example here is the telegram that I sent to all of the Republican state chairmen, which reads as follows: individuals suffering from the earthquake desperately need the assistance as embodied in Senator Jackson's Bill 2719 to establish a retroactive disaster insurance program to ensure rebuilding of the private sector of the Alaskan economy. Your assistance through your elected representatives is badly needed. Advise if you can assist us. In response to that telegram that I sent, and Stan McCutcheon also sent the same, we got some wonderful response. As an example, I got a telegram from the state chairman of California where he pledged all 15 congressmen and his senator that they would do all they could to possibly support it. I got the same type of telegram from Texas, Idaho, Connecticut, Rhode Island, North Dakota. North Dakota, I even got a letter back from the senator already saying that he will do everything within his power to aid the private sector of the economy. The same with Arizona and believe it or not, Senator Goldwater, and I'd like to quote, says, "If we sincerely believe in the form of government we are advocating, it is up to us to help these people." And this is the same response we've gotten from the National Committee in Michigan, New York, Nevada, all the way around the United States, from both parties, through our contacts directly with the state chairman and the National Committee people. The overwhelming support that we seem to be getting for the program as laid out in the Jackson Senate Bill 2719. We have also, through a subcommittee, was headed by Margie Fitzpatrick, Mrs. Dr. Fitzpatrick. She has contacted over the 400 of the local clubs and organizations, running from the Kiwanis to the Soroptimist to the Lions, the VFW, the DAR, and has given them a copy of the bill along with the type of letter that she would like, or we would like, that they would write to their parent organizations or to each state chapter to get them to also assist. This is the type of push that both parties went into when we got statehood. Also, I'd like to mention just a moment the part that the organized labor has played in this is very important. As you know, and I've read in the papers, that many of the labor organizations have contributed to the disaster relief fund, but not only that, they are also going out all the way and getting their legislative assistants in Washington to contact the senators and congressmen that they have influence with to see that we are given a fair break on this. We don't want to be forgotten due to the fact that, as we all know, maybe there will be another disaster somewhere, but we feel this cooperation by the labor unions with the private sector, the businessmen, and the cooperation we've gotten from every citizen, this is going to put us in a very favorable position when the committee starts considering the bill.
Well, what I want to explain a little more clearly, if I can, is that what we're trying to do is we're lobbying for this bill, and we're trying to get all the people in the various states who have positions to the people on this committee, like, for instance, the National Committee men, your National Committee women, state chairman, all these people who we believe have some influence on the state senators and the governors and the officials of the Congress, the congressmen, to wire their congressmen from these other states, encouraging them to support this Alaska bill. Now, we feel that support just from Alaska is not enough. It's needed, but it's not quite enough. If we get support from all of the other 49 states, we will have put together one of the biggest lobbyist groups you've ever heard tell of, both Republican and Democrat state chairmen, National Committee men and women, and all the various governors and senators and so forth in states. And the cooperation we're getting back from these telegrams and telephone calls. Now, I want to point out that Stanley has said at several of the meetings that the telephone call, a personal telephone call right to the person you want to speak to, be it a senator or his assistant or the state chairman or the National Committee man of a state, is terrific. They all say they'll get right on with it, they'll contact them directly. Now, 5 states, Alabama, West Virginia, California, Oklahoma, and Minnesota, have written back and wired back that they will not only lobby for this bill, but they'll send groups to Washington to lobby for it before the committees. Now, this kind of response is really fabulous. And if we keep the ball rolling, if we get it moving, and keep it rolling, I don't see how it can fail. I don't want to be too optimistic, but I do want to say that this was the same fight we had with statehood, and it took us years and years to build up the support because we contacted each and every senator. Oh, it took us months. We wrote them letters and got answers, and then went down to see them, sent various groups. But this is a crash program. Everything's by telephone, and we're spending a lot of money. And we'll get into that money factor in the next 8 or 10 minutes here. But we are spending a lot of money, we are getting results, and we need your help to write out to your friends in various other states and ask them to write to their congressman or any public official and have him support it. Now, I understand yesterday we got a report at the committee meeting where the head of the garment workers in New York, Mr. Dubinsky, he was contacted, and he immediately said that his whole 5,000 people would support us, the Garment Workers Union, and they would get a hold of all the congressmen of New York, which is quite a few, and all these, or rather both of the senators from New York, and see if they couldn't encourage them to support this measure. So I think we're really rolling, and we ought to try to keep it that way.
Jack Simpson, we want to ask about your committee. I know that you're a co-chairman of a subcommittee, and I believe you're involved in passing the word around among the disaster area, various communities here in this part of Alaska. Could you tell us about your job, please?
Oh, yes. Russ Meekins and I, working together as co-chairman, have the responsibility of bringing to the other areas the efforts being exerted, as you fellows have described, that are not insignificant. I just wanted to call attention to the numbers of this committee, running 40 and 50 people, men and women, taking time out of busy business days, meeting almost daily, and developing the program that has been described here. And it'd be easy for people to get the impression, because of this effort in Anchorage, that this work is for Anchorage and coming only from Anchorage. And as we all know, this is a program that's necessary for all Alaska and all Alaska, because we're all affected in the economy. So to help with this, and also over the nation, and call attention, we don't want the impression to reach other areas out of our state as well as in, that we're asking for handouts. That isn't the purpose. All we want is a reasonable chance, and we will come out of this and pull out of it in good shape. And the program's already underway by the city council and other areas are not insignificant in connection with this Jackson bill. So to accomplish this, Russ Meekins and myself, working with the Chamber of Commerce, Don Dickey's in town, who is manager of the State Chamber of Commerce. We've talked to Claire Banks, who is manager of the Anchorage Chamber of Commerce, are going to help us to go to not only the disaster areas, Lowell. We're going to go to Valdez, Cordova, and Seward, and Kodiak, yes. And we're going to help them by letting them know what we're doing, keep them advised, and also benefit by their opinions and help, and coordinate their efforts with us. And we're also going to Fairbanks, Juneau, Ketchikan, and other areas, so that it will be a concerted effort and a coordinated effort of all Alaska to meet a problem that has come to us in a way that is unusual, in that it's beyond our immediate financial scope. But with all this program, as you have pointed out and others, with a proper rate of interest, a proper program for all of us will soon take heart, and most of us have. And the most encouraging thing, I think, we can say for these people outside who have, without exception, held out, as Russ and Frank have pointed out, some of the returns coming back from these other areas offering their all-out help, is because of our attitude, in which I know Lowell is, and you working in the publicity area have helped, and our effort is to help you keep this picture right, and that is that all we want is a reasonable chance, and we will accomplish that. And that, in effect, Lowell, is what we're working at with the others.
You're right, Jack.
I'd like to have you explain, inasmuch as you're publicity director for the Catastrophe Committee, what your part has been in disseminating this information.
Well, thanks, Frank. Jack gave me a lead on that, too. I was just going to say that I was quickly named a committee of one to get in touch with the press outside, radio and television, as best I could, to see if we can keep the pot boiling, so to speak, so that the nation doesn't forget about us, not only that we had a disaster, but that we need some assistance from the outside if we're going to recover. And so I've been in touch with some of my connections outside, and in particular I got an old friend on the telephone who happens to be the president of the Scripps Howard newspaper chain. And that chain has papers all over the nation, and he said that he would do the best he could to see that his papers and their editorials gave us a good break and brought up this matter once in a while, specifically mentioning the Jackson Plan. And also another guy named Thomas outside, so I hear, has been pretty kind to us on TV. I missed that show the other night, didn't hear anything about it. But I hear he devoted about 5 minutes of his time on What's My Line to the problem up here, and I hope he mentioned the Jackson Plan. And I know that he and others also have been carrying the ball for us as best they can on radio. And I think in the case of the elder Thomas, to such an extent that his sponsor's getting a little bit mad at him, so he's going to have to be careful. Well, we're getting right down to the wire, and I think here, this is the point, Frank, where you and Russ, which one of you wants to take this on? Russ first or Frank first?
Well, I think we could probably go into it together. As you know, these telephone calls and telegrams and all this correspondence, just a little thing that you forgot to include on what you had done was mailing 300
That's right.
of the Anchorage Times and the Daily News Miner with a personal letter signed by the whole committee to each one of the state chairmen and to the National Committee people. This was a tremendous job, but it gave them a complete picture layout, which says more than 1,000,000 words. This was one of Lowell's tasks.
Well, Frank, I want to thank the ladies of both the Democrat headquarters and Republican headquarters for handling that, because it was a chore typing and mailing those things, and the women just took over and they did it.
But I wanted to point out just this little thing alone with the postage cost over $300. Now, I know Stan McCutcheon's phone bill must be over several thousands of dollars, along with mine and Mr. Hickles and Mr. Meekins. And we're generally, most people aren't in a position to shoulder this thing alone, so this is where we have to make a pitch. If we're to continue this work and have the funds to do it, to carry on with the postage and the mailing, we have all volunteer help. But it is cost of disseminating this information that you make a pitch that we need some money, Russ.
Well, you can just imagine the number of phone calls we're making here daily and the length of those phone calls to explain the plan and request these people to support it and how they can help us. Everybody writes you from outside. They say, well, what can we do? Now, we want you to write them all back and say, this is what you can do. This bill is Senate Bill number 2719. 2719. It's called the Jackson Plan. And send your letter to your folks outside and to people who you buy things from and just every acquaintance you know, and ask them to write letters to Congress supporting the Jackson Plan. Now, along that line, what we need is funds. We don't have time, nor do we have the manpower to go knocking door to door and asking with our hand out for funds to take care of these expenses. But we would like you to mail in your check for $5 or $10 to the Republican headquarters, which is Box 423. Is that right? 423.
On the front.
Or the Democratic headquarters, which is 330 6th Avenue, and the box numbers are on the corner there, and addresses and so forth. And the title of this committee was the Joint Catastrophe Committee of the Republican and Democratic parties. So we need money, and we need it now. We don't need it next week or the week after. We need it right now, and we'd like you to do it right away. In connection with this, we have a committee set up that will contact personally all the professionals in town and all the business houses that are still in business, and we will go door to door to those places, but we cannot go door to door to all the homes. So we'd like you to send in your contribution right away.
Well, thank you very much, gentlemen. I see the time is running out. I'd just like to conclude by saying that this kind of joint effort between the two political parties here in Alaska and amongst all of us throughout the state is what it's going to take to really put this thing over, and I think we stand a very good chance of it. And if all of you who are listening or viewing will join us in taking part in pushing this Jackson Plan, Senate Bill 2719, we'll go a long way toward getting ourselves back on our economic feet. Thank you very much.
The preceding program was a special public service feature of KENI presented by the Disaster Relief Committee. This is Midnight Sun Television, KENI Television, Channel 2, Anchorage. Maybe the mañana...